Old Guy Talks is all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love. Don't wait, don't hesitate, don't procrastinate. Opt in now.
This is Oris, the Old Guy from www.oldguytalks.com, here with his special guest, John Spinks, the author of Cult Escape. And I will tell you that in looking at the materials for this conversation I'm having with John, it was incredibly fascinating. It's an incredible story. In my opinion, there is a screenplay here. John, very definitely. This has all the characteristics of a drama. It has the tragedy, the enslavement, the realization, and the escape, and then the success that you finally have. So I think that's very exciting. So John lives in England, and he has a master's in life coaching and psychology. He's also a justice counselor and relationship coach. And for those of us in the States, John, we're not going to understand, what is a justice counselor?
Well, thanks for having me on, Forrest. Restorative justice counsellor. It is where a crime has happened, and instead of going to court through all the process and all that takes, then we go and see them, and we find out what's happened, and we get them to the perpetrator and the victim together, and we flush out the situation, put the cards on the table with a view to drawing a line under it to save the whole thing going to court. 9 times out of 10, it works. People end up shaking hands, they forgive each other. It's amazing, and that's what restorative justice happens.
Okay, and also, and we're going to talk about this at another time, but you also have a product or an information product that you put out called The Answer, Little Steps to Your Blissful Relationship, and that's something that is available now, but we'll be talking about it later. But I want to tell you, I want to focus on this whole concept of cults and your story, your experience in cults and what's happening. So, John, what is a cult, and how do you identify if you are in one, and versus, let's say, an organization or something that's fairly structured? What's the difference between a cult? What makes it a cult?
Well, the English Oxford Dictionary, starting with that, defines a cult simply as a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. That is the basic definition of a cult. I've done research on this on LinkedIn. I've done questionnaires asking people generally, what do you think a cult is? And the public perception is generally, and I wrote this down, it's control, where a leader controls a group of people with their religious beliefs. And so it's where there's control. And so it's, I've never met a cult that admits they're a cult. Cult leaders don't want to be called cults. And yet it's a system that controls people. And a question I would ask, how much control is acceptable?
Okay, so how do cults control people? What kind of strategies do they use to control people?
What they do is they have laws of which people have to obey, and there's literally thousands of cults, over 5,000 in the US, over 500 in the UK, and they're all different, and they normally have a leader, or usually a man, and through his opinions and theories and theologies and so-called revelations, he devises laws to control people. Now, most of them, I would suspect, are sincere. So they're not doing it just simply to make money or for power. They do it with a genuine belief, so they're incredibly believable. And people are drawn to it. And they end up controlling people, and if people don't obey the rules, there's consequences. People will suffer one way or another if they fail to keep the laws that the cult leaders put out.
Okay, so what kind of tactics do they use to control? Like, more specifically, you say they'll suffer the consequences. What tactics do they use to control people, to brainwash people? How does that occur?
Well, personally, I was born into a religious cult, and so I knew nothing else. I was reared up in it. To me, it was the norm. just like brushing your teeth. It was my lifestyle. But when people, adults in particular, join cults, they are weaned into them gradually. They're not told the full hit from the beginning. But as they get deeper and deeper into it, they start to feel an obligation to fit in to the pressure and the peer pressure. And so the laws then they take on board, and it's very psychological. And the cult leaders, they change the laws. The laws evolve, which keeps everything moving, keeps the power going. And so people just get into it gradually without realizing, and then eventually they find that there's reasons why they can't leave.
Mm-hmm. What do they do? Is it control your sleep, your eating, your time? What would be, let's say in the cult that you were in, what would be a typical day for you as let's say maybe let's talk about maybe not necessarily because you were born in there, but let's say at age 7 through 10 or somewhere in that range. What would be a typical day?
Well, I believe that cults control to varying degrees. They've got the full spectrum. You get cults that control your life 100%, even to the point whereby if they say it's time to commit suicide, then that's what they do. Right down to 1% where if you don't turn up for one of their meetings, you'll get frowned at. And so the varying degrees of control. The one I was in, I would say it was a 95% controlling cult. So a whole life was taken up with it. So what the length of your hair, a 7 to 10-year-old in school, you weren't allowed to go to religious education, into school assembly. You couldn't eat with your school friends. You couldn't go and play in their houses. You had to attend 11 meetings a week, 5 on a Sunday. It was just the norm. This is a 7 to 10-year-old. You had to wear a white shirt on a Sunday, and there's a whole host of different rules and laws that you had to abide by. You couldn't have television, couldn't have music, radio, computers, mobile phones in those days. And so there was laws that covered many aspects of your life.
Okay. What now? Was it your parents that joined the cult?
My parents were born into it, and my grandparents.
They were born into it,
and so were my grandparents.
Okay, so wow, so this is a generational thing. So when was so the particular cult that you were basically raised in has been around for quite a while. What's the history of that cult? I'm sure they made you learn that hard. I'm sure they made you learn that really significantly.
Yeah, 1831. The Plymouth Brethren had the first meeting in England, Plymouth, and J.N. Darby, who was a Bible scholar from Ireland, he got dissatisfied with the Church of Ireland, where he was a minister. He came to Plymouth. He started up the Plymouth Brethren. He started evangelizing in Europe. And when he came back at one point in 1848, his doctrine had been altered. And so he withdrew from everyone who disagreed with him, and his group became known as the Exclusive Brethren. So the Exclusive Brethren started being called that in 1848, and in 1966, I was born into it.
Okay. So you were going along because for generations, your parents, your grandparents, and others were going around and saying, okay, this is the way to live. This is the way I need to be. This is what I need to do. What was? Let me back up here. Did you have very much contact with the outside world, or were you just pretty much completely shut off?
No, we went to school. We had normal jobs. Most jobs were self-employed, and so we went shopping. We went out for the day, but we weren't allowed to eat with anybody who wasn't in our group. We weren't allowed. So anyone in our house couldn't go to their house. Couldn't go to after-school activities, and so because we went to 11 meetings a week, then we were spending all our social time, with members in the cult.
Okay. what was, at what age and when did you, and what was that moment that was the first time that you realized this is not right? When was that time? What was that time, and what was the evolution of that to your decision to escape? And I want to talk in great detail about the escape after we talk about this.
Sure. Well, my story isn't a usual one, whereby people find there's something wrong, they suspect something wrong with the cult we're in, and they eventually find out that it's something they don't want to be part of because it's wrong, and their tipping point comes and they leave. With myself, that didn't happen. I, from birth, was reared up to believe it is the true church, the only one. We had the truth. We had the leader who was the universal leader. It's one of his titles. And so when I got to 18, I saw I'd been driving for a bit, and I started to experience some of the wicked things in this world, like football matches and the cinema, and things of which we were forbidden to do. And over the next 4 years, as I started to realise these things weren't harming me, and they were neutral, good things, normal. A desire for the bright lights of the city, you could say, started to attract me, and the boredom of 11 meetings a week started to contrast the two. And I became like a rope in a tug of war, whereby I was being pulled one way increasingly by the desires I had to explore the world and to be myself and to find myself. But on the other side of the rope was my parents, who I loved, and there was no way that I could leave them, because I loved them, and I knew that if I left, once you leave or once they withdraw from you, that you may never see them again. And that's why it took me 4 years to eventually to escape.
Yeah. So during those 4 years, was it? Did you have to actually prepare psychologically to leave, or were you afraid that you would be basically forcibly retained in the cult? Why did it take 4 years to make that decision to escape, or why was the process lasting 4 years?
When something's part of you, like the lifestyle was a part of me, having been born into it. The only people I really knew and met with every single day of my life were my friends, people I trusted, and then there was my family, my brothers, and I knew that to leave would be the end of that, complete end. And when you've been brought up in something like that, psychologically, not only the physical as I just described, but the doctrine and the indoctrination of their Bible interpretations, many Bible verses stacked up, saying that if you were to leave, then terrible things would happen to you, and you might go to hell. And so there's a whole mixture psychologically, which made it, which tied it, which changed you really to being there. And then, of course, there was the unknown, coming into a world which you'll be on your own completely, not knowing anybody. That would take you out your comfort zone, to say the least. And so all these things added up. And so within the 4 years, I was unhappy. And so when I came to the tipping point, which was on the 22nd birthday, I still believed that it was the right place on earth and the only right place where I should be. I didn't leave because I came to understand it was wrong. That was 2 years later, which is I'll tell you about a bit later. Okay. But I came to the end. I came to a realization on the 22nd birthday. I was in the bedroom. I looked out the window, and I saw these two drunken people down below staggering, and I thought they're having a good time, and I'm not. And then I had this realization, like an epiphany moment, which was, in 10 years from now, I'm going to be 32. I was good at maths, and I'm going to spend another 10 years miserable unless I do something about it now. No one's going to do it for me. Either I do it or I stay 10 years more miserable. And with that, I made a commitment. And I said, that's it. I'm 100% out of here. And from that moment, it was like a peace came on me. And I purposed then I planned to get out by getting my own accommodation, by getting my phone line in from a business. And it took me 3 months to do that, to set everything up. And then came the terrible day where I came down in the morning, 7th of November, 1988. And I said to my parents that I've done something wrong, and so I'm going to leave. And they said, you don't have to, you don't have to leave. Stay here. Don't leave. And I said, oh, I've got to. I said, because he said, well, what have you done? I said, I've been with a woman. And I made that up because that's a sin which you should get excommunicated for. And so they said, no, don't go, don't go. I made my mum cry, which was the first time I ever did that in my life. And that was absolutely devastated. But I said, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And that was just to try and comfort them a bit. And so I left, and it was the saddest day of my life, but the greatest decision I ever made, looking back. And so I still believe, for the next 2 years, that it was still the right place. And to answer your question, when did I begin to believe it was wrong? It was actually 2 years later. And that was when I'd met my brother, my older brother, who I hadn't seen for 9 years, because he left as soon as he could when he was 16. He walked out when he was legally able to. And long story short, I actually had a 9-hour conversation with him. And in the conversation, he told me about the system and how they were always changing the rules and regulations and the laws, which they were. There was times when you could have pets. There was times in the 1960s and before then you could eat with people. There was times when you could be in a trade union. There was many things that you could do, and now you couldn't. There was times when you could live in a semi-detached or terraced house, and then it had to be semi, then it had to be detached. And my brother quoted a Bible verse, which is that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And as soon as he said that, I suddenly realised, I could see that the Christian brethren laws are not the same. They change. And my eyes, it's like my eyes were opened and I saw it is a cult. And I cried because I realised at that point I'm never going back. I can never go back now. And so if my parents never came out, I wouldn't see them again.
Yeah, that's absolutely. That must be like, it's hard to imagine how gut wrenching that would be, because you're there. It was fortunate that you found your brother, because otherwise you'd be going through this on your own and not really sure what is going on. Let's talk about the fact and the doctrine of separation and how that's used to, in your particular situation, how it was used to control your ability to interact with your family that you left behind.
Well, J.N. Darby, he wrote a pamphlet in 1847, and this is the core pillar of the exclusive brethren. And if there's other cults out there, they may relate to this, not exactly the same words, but a lot of cults are based upon this. It was called separation from evil, God's principle of unity. And the doctrine simply means that to be in unity with God, according to whichever cult or whatever leader says so, you have to separate yourself from what and how the current leader defines as evil. So over the years, the leader of the exclusive brethren would decide what was evil. And so there was a time when having pets were wrong, and so everybody had to get rid of the pets. There was a time when living in a house which had shared drains and joining walls became evil, and so people had to move house. There was a time when a lot of these rules had changed over the years. So according to the leader or the man of God's choice and decision on what was evil, defined how the lifestyle had to be. And so if anybody broke these rules and laws, then they would be separated from, meaning they would be excommunicated, withdrawn from, put out of fellowship. And it would mean that those who stayed had to maintain separation from the people who had left. And I've got a chapter in the book called "Do Religious Cults Split Up Families?" because they claim they don't. And this is one of the most important points, because I think one of the biggest factors of cults is that they separate families. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's legal. It is not illegal to have a cult. It is not illegal to start a cult, to control people, to separate the families, to put fear into them, to get them to sign over your house, your money, your will to them. It's not. It is perfectly legal to do so. And so, I mean, the campaign I'm running is to bring awareness. And one of the things that many people don't realise is that if they join cults, they may be a cult that will separate the family. And that is something which is probably one of the worst things I would say that happens.
Sure. What have you seen your parents since you left that day?
My parents weren't allowed to see me. Okay. So I didn't see them for many years. But to cut a long story short, about 4 years ago, my mother developed Alzheimer's. And I had a phone call. I came out of the cinema, and on my mobile phone was my dad's phone number. And I recognised the number. And I think he'd phoned me 3 times in 27 years by that point. And so I spoke to him, and he said, Mum's gone into a care home. So I said, can I visit her? He said, yes. And the reason was that because she was under a neutral roof, which means that we couldn't go under their roof because they had to be separate. But because she's in a neutral roof, I was able to go visit her. So I went with her. I went for the last 3 years of her life every week to see her, which was lovely. And in fact, I gave her some health products, which were recommended for Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Mm-hmm. Yeah, virgin coconut oil and serapeptase, make a note of that. And she recovered massively to the point of, I would say, 50 to 70% compos mentis. And we had a wonderful last 3 years. And my dad was there in the care home maybe about 12 times over the 3 years. And so we had a little chat.
Okay, wonderful. Is there a consequence to the family members that are left behind when one person out of the family leaves a cult?
Do you mean the people who stay in? Who stay in,
yes. Are there repercussions for them?
It's extremely embarrassing for them to have somebody of the family to leave, and I wouldn't say they get punished in any way, but it is a massive tragedy and a loss. And over the years, I saw families split. I saw tears. I saw wives whose husbands were separated from them. I saw children whose parents had left, and they were now staying with friends or family, and they were separated from the parents. And so, when you say repercussions, no particular repercussions, but great sorrow.
That's a very very hard thing to do. I think it's very challenging for something like that. So let's get kind of fast forward here into the future, and let's talk about let's say you have a family member or a friend who's in a cult, and it's not a good situation. I know that you're the director of operations for Cult Escape, and I just put up your URL there for everyone to see. What can someone do to help that person get out of that cult? And is it possible to help someone if they don't want to leave a cult? Because I imagine a lot of times people are for whatever reasons have said, okay, this is good.
Just to say, after cult, there's a dash.
There's a what?
After cult, there's a dash between cult and escape.
Cult.escape? Okay.
Cult-escape.
Oh, dash escape. Okay.
Yeah,
let me do that. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, okay.
Yeah, to answer your question, I've got a younger brother who's in exclusive loving still. He's married. He's got 2 children. And once people get married, it's even harder to leave. Thank you. Because if they were to leave, they could potentially lose their children, lose their wife or husband, lose their in-laws, lose the family and friends. And so what can you do about them? Well, nowadays I believe in people's free will and choices, and I don't believe in control, and I don't believe in manipulating people. So if people want to stay in a cult, if people want to join a cult, they're free to. But what I'm concerned about is that people don't know the consequences of what can happen, and they don't know the full facts, or they don't know the bigger picture. And my desire is just to alert people, to warn them, and to create awareness of what happens in religious cults, a lot of religious cults, so that people can make a more informed decision before they either join one, or if people are curious and they would like to leave the cult they're in, that they can find resources on the internet, YouTube. There's many contacts, phone numbers out there they can get in touch with. My site, cultscape.com, is just one of those, where there's a resource to encourage people, to give them hope. There's stories on there, videos and testimonies, whereby people can see that there are people who have left, that it is possible, even though it seems impossible, it is possible to leave and have a normal life and have a better life. People don't have to stay, because the thing that gets me the most is that there are people who want to leave the cult they're in right now. No matter what cult it is, there are people who want to leave and they can't because they're trapped. They feel psychologically that there's no way, because the doctrine they've been indoctrinated with forbids them to leave. Mm-hmm. They may go to hell, a whole host of reasons. And then, of course, the thought of leaving their families is just too much. And it's those people in particular that are going through this at the moment. And it took me 4 years to go through this until I realised that I had to take responsibility. I had to take a leap of faith, and I did, and it was the best decision I made of my life.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially since you were born into it and have so many generations of your family that were part of this particular cult that you were actually made the active decision to leave and move on, and had the courage to do so, because I'm sure that for every one person that leaves, there's probably a lot of people that have been left that are in one that would like to leave, but are afraid and don't have the courage to do so. So does your organization offer resources for people that want to leave a cult?
Yes, well, there's phone numbers, for example, where there's help available. There's stories of people. When a common problem us humans have is that when we're going through something, we can tend to think we're the only one. And to realise that there's people out there, and there are many, many people who have escaped their cult. And my personal story is just one story of many, and it can give people hope. And people who feel trapped, they don't need to. That there is help, there are resources out there. And yes, so the website, cultscape.com, is a resource of itself to give people hope and to direct people to further resources as well.
Okay, all right. Well, John, it's a fascinating look into a world that many of us are totally unfamiliar with. Only heard about it little bits here and there. Most of the time, we hear about it when you have the very tragic events that occur where people die either from mass drinking of poison Kool-Aid to the deaths at the Branch Davidian compound in Texas and other places. So it's a world that is out there. And one of the things that really struck me was the fact that it was, I was most of the time people think about a cult as being somewhere out in the middle of nowhere in a very desolate area. And I think what kind of surprised me about this is the fact that these cults actually can exist inside a city or a town. That they don't necessarily have to be a compound locked off somewhere out, in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely. The research has been done, and as I said before, there's over 5,000 cults in the US, over 500 in the UK. And yes, many are small groups, they meet in houses. The exclusive brethren that I was in, who have changed the name incidentally now. My experiences all relate to between 1966 and 1988. But they have their buildings and they meet in there. And many of them are secretive. They've never heard of them. I mean, have you heard of the exclusive brethren before?
No, never have. Never have. This is the first time.
Well, as I say, there's hundreds, there's literally thousands. And it's just making people aware of this so that they can be better informed. Some cults recruit and they can entice people into joining. And so it's just one of the greatest tools is to make people aware so that they've got choices.
Okay. All right. Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on oldguytalks.com, and look forward to future time when we sit and talk about your the answer, literal steps to your blissful product. It would be a whole different, more of a upbeat program than this one was. So, though the fact that it has that you have a happy ending certainly leaves us on a upbeat note. So this is Oris, the old guy from www.oldguytalks.com, signing off with his guest John Spinks. Remember, it's all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love.
If you are interested in creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love, then become a member at oldguytalks.com and get access to the cave area, where not only do I have my interviews with doctors on cutting-edge therapies for erectile dysfunction, but I will have other things that are posted in there that will help you create that kick-ass life that you want for yourself and others. And we're going to be talking a lot about different kinds of vices and virtues. So opt in and become a member